When LeBron James joined the Los Angeles Lakers, it was inevitable that they would be a polarizing team. You had LeBron, a player that is passionately loved by some and hated by others, going to a big market franchise that has dominated other fan bases for decades. On top of that, LeBron and the Lakers were able to lure Anthony Davis away from a small market team in New Orleans, which is a strategy that is generally not well liked in the NBA community. Lastly, the LeBron and AD-led Lakers were able to win their first championship together in a relatively easy fashion. I can't say with certainty that they would have lost in a potential matchup with the Clippers, Bucks, or Raptors, but I can say that a series against one of those teams would have made their path to a ring much more difficult. The point being that many fans have been rooting against the Lakers ever since LeBron and AD joined forces, and despite winning a championship, a lot of people are still doubtful of this team, regardless of whether their doubt is coming from a place of bias or not. The Los Angeles Lakers are a championship contender, but mainly due to injuries, this team currently sits in the 6th seed out west. In today's video, I want to discuss whether or not the Lakers can overcome the obstacles of being a lower seed and go on to win back-to-back titles.
Murray inside, incredible!
LeBron James with no regard for human life.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
First things first, I want to talk about the strengths of this team. At the making of this video, the Los Angeles Lakers rank first in defensive rating, even though LeBron and AD have missed a significant amount of time this season. In their absence, guys like Dennis Schroeder, KCP, and Caruso have been pests on the defensive end. Markieff Morris, Wes Matthews, and Harrell have provided good energy and effort, and Drummond has been an active presence since signing with the team as well. When you add a guy like AD who can guard the other team's best player regardless of position, and LeBron who still has a ton of defensive ability at 36 years old, that Lakers defense becomes even scarier. However, that doesn't fully explain why the Lakers are as good as they are on that end. In my opinion, LA's defense is as great as it is because they take away the strengths of their opponents. In an era where teams are shooting a lot of threes, the Lakers force teams to not only shoot poorly from three, but to shoot limited attempts from outside due to their ability to chase shooters off the three-point line. This is very valuable because A, it prevents a poor shooting team in the Lakers from being shot out of the gym, and B, it can mentally affect a shooter knowing that they'll rarely ever get a clean look against LA's defense. In addition to that, Los Angeles is incredible at defending players that try to attack off the bounce. Their guards are great at getting into passing lanes, getting deflections, and just causing havoc in general. Not only that, the Lakers are also great at blocking shots, meaning that teams are not too excited about going into the paint against them either. Like I said, this team will only get better on the defensive end once LeBron and AD are 100%, because they'll provide LA with even more defensive versatility, which is just another plus for this team. It's clear that Los Angeles is an amazing defensive team, but that shouldn't come as much of a surprise to anyone as they were elite on that end last year. What should really scare teams is that LA was a really good offensive team in 2019-20, and they've only added more offensive talent this season. Yes, the Lakers will have to build up their chemistry since LeBron and Davis have missed so many games, but there are still 10 games left in the regular season, and although it's not the best time to do it, these guys will continue to adjust to each other throughout the playoffs as well. Even though they'll have limited time together at full health, I think there's reason to be optimistic about this team's offensive potential. When Drummond first joined the team, he was struggling with his percentages, but recently he's been more efficient and his teammates are a big reason why. In the past, Drummond had efficiency problems because he was being relied upon too heavily in Detroit and Cleveland. Drummond isn't the most skilled scorer and he doesn't have the softest touch either, meaning that he really shouldn't be getting many post-up opportunities unless he has a mismatch. However, Drummond is a great rim roller, lob threat, and rim runner, and his teammates have been setting him up very well so that he only has to worry about finishing and not creating his own shot. Once LeBron returns, that's just going to provide Drummond with another guy that can set him up for easy buckets. Dennis Schroeder is another guy that gives the Lakers a different look from last year, as he's a player that has the speed and penetration abilities of a guy like Rajon Rondo, but with better scoring ability. Dennis is also coming off his best month of the season in which he averaged 16 points and 8 assists on really good shooting splits. Last season, the Lakers struggled when LeBron wasn't on the floor because they didn't have another guy that could consistently act as both a scorer and distributor at that point guard position. Schroeder is obviously not on the same level as LeBron, but he gives the Lakers a reliable player that can initiate the offense, while also being a threat as a scorer when LeBron rests. Lakers fans should also be happy that Dennis is shooting very well from three just before playoff time, because LeBron is at his best when he is surrounded by reliable shooters. Off the bench, the Lakers have more scoring punch than they did last year with the addition of Montrezl Harrell and the emergence of Talen Horton-Tucker to go along with Kyle Kuzma. They also added Ben McLemore recently, which was a very underrated pickup in my opinion. The Lakers need all the shooting they can get, and McLemore is someone that could have a few big scoring nights throughout the playoffs. Another thing I like about LA's bench is that they have two guys in Marc Gasol and Markieff Morris that can play the role of a stretch five. If they want to play a center with size that can pull the opposing center out of the paint on defense, they can give minutes to Gasol. And if they want to play small ball, they could run Markieff at the 5. Lastly and most importantly, LeBron and Anthony Davis take their games to the next level come playoff time. There are a number of factors that can make a team great, but those factors can be trumped by a team with two superstars that can take over any game. The LA Lakers have many strengths, but their greatest strength is that they have the best duo in the NBA. For the reasons that I just mentioned, the LA Lakers are a championship contender, but they are certainly not perfect. Like everyone else, the Lakers have weaknesses, and in their case, the root of their problem stems from an inability to consistently hit outside shots. For the season, this is where they rank in terms of threes made, threes attempted, and three-point percentage, and as you can see, they're bottom 10 in the league in all of these categories. When you factor in percentage, volume, and degree of difficulty, LeBron might be the best three-point shooter on this team, and that's not a good thing. LeBron is one of the most unique players in NBA history because he's so great at getting to and finishing around the rim, and on top of that, he's a phenomenal passer. That being the case, you're almost wasting a little bit of LeBron's talent when you don't surround him with competent floor spacers. Of course, he can still get assists in post-up, pick and roll, and transition situations, but having a guy that can drive and kick to his teammates is so valuable, and the Lakers aren't making the most out of LeBron's ability to do that. In addition to being a bad three-point shooting team, LA is a terrible free throw shooting team as well. This year, the Lakers are near the bottom of the league in free throw percentage, and adding a 61% free throw shooter in Andre Drummond doesn't exactly solve this issue. In close game situations, free throws can be the deciding factor between winning and losing, and come playoff time, poor free throw shooting could cause you to lose an entire series. It also doesn't help that other contenders such as the Nets, Suns, Jazz, and Clippers all shoot 80% or higher from the line. Getting away from their shooting, turnovers are another thing that could be the potential downfall of this team. I recorded the first half of this video before the Lakers-Kings game last night, and I've been recording the rest after it ended, and in that game the Lakers had 21 turnovers. There have been too many times this year where they've been careless with the basketball, and that has lost them a lot of games. They do force just as many turnovers as they commit, but on any given night they could commit 20 plus turnovers, lose the turnover battle, and get beat by a Kings team without De'Aaron Fox. Against weaker competition, you might be able to get by with careless mistakes like that, but against tougher opponents in the playoffs, turnovers have a much larger impact, and they can cause you to lose games that you would have otherwise won. While those weaknesses could hurt them, they are also controllable. What the Lakers have not been able to control this season is their injuries, and to a lesser degree, their seeding. We all know that LeBron and AD have missed a lot of time, and without their two best players, the Lakers have dropped in the standings. However, when discussing these things, I think it's important for us to ask one simple question. Even at full health, would the Lakers be considered the best team in the league? And if you have to stop and think about the answer to that question, then yes, being a 6th seed is definitely a problem. The Lakers will likely have to go through the Nuggets, either the Suns or Jazz, as well as the Clippers just to get to the finals. And if they got there, they'd probably face off against a team like the Nets or Bucks, who by the way would also have home court advantage over LA in a potential matchup. Is it possible for the Lakers to pull off a championship run without home court advantage? Yes, but the only way they can is if they're healthy, which brings me to Anthony Davis. I'm not so concerned about LeBron, but there should be some worry about AD and how he's performed since returning from injury. Davis missed 30 consecutive games before coming back on April 22nd, and since then he's only been averaging 17.4 points and 6.2 rebounds on 41% from the field, 20% from 3, and 71.4% from the line. Obviously, it's reasonable to expect these kinds of performances when someone is returning from a serious injury, but if the Lakers want to win a championship, they'll need AD to be back at 100%, and I worry that he may not get there this season. On top of that, Frank Vogel won't be doing AD any favors because he doesn't really run any actions for him. If you've watched AD play with the Lakers over the past year and a half, you'll see that most of his buckets come out of the pick and roll or in ISO situations. Vogel is a great defensive mind, but he's one of those coaches that relies on the talent of his best players to get points. When you have two superstars, simply relying on them to score isn't the worst strategy in the world, but when your two superstars are also recovering from pretty significant injuries, you have to step in as the coach and find ways to make life easier on them. Look at it this way. Anthony Davis' injury was more serious than LeBron's because he missed more time than LeBron. Since coming back, AD has not looked great, meaning that it may take him some time to get back to 100%, possibly even the rest of the season. And yes, the more in-game reps Davis gets, the more he'll improve, but what if his injury only allows him to get back to 85 to 90% of what he's capable of this year? With that in mind, Vogel needs to try and get the most out of AD on the offensive end. If Vogel can get him some easier shots within the flow of the offense, then maybe Anthony Davis looks 95% like his old self versus 85 to 90% if he doesn't. So with all of that being said, it's time for me to answer the question that I posed in the title of this video. Will the Lakers repeat as NBA champions? I'll have to see how they play the rest of the season before I make any final playoff predictions, but at the moment I'm leaning towards no. Coming into the season, I felt like the Lakers were second best to the Clippers in the West, and the addition of Andre Drummond hasn't changed my stance. As I discussed in the video, the Lakers are an amazing defensive team, they force turnovers, block shots, and offensively they have two superstars to go along with some solid scoring off the bench. But even though they have all these strengths, the Lakers are one of the worst shooting teams in the league, they turn the ball over a lot, their two best players are recovering from injuries, and in all likelihood they won't have home court advantage in any of their playoff series. The rest of the league has gotten more talented, and it feels like there are just too many things going against the Lakers this year. Their championship window is still open for the next few seasons, but there may be a little hiatus between Ring 1 and Ring 2.